Okay, so I kind of want to do a full story video. And today's full story video is going to be about the Avengers once again, but Kurt Busiek and George Perez run on the Avengers. And let me explain. You see, back in the late 1990s, for Marvel Comics, one of their main goals was to get the Avengers back on the map because in the mid 1990s, the Avengers kind of fell off, right? And you then had Marvel push those characters over into Heroes Reborn reality. Now, we already covered the whole idea of Heroes Reborn, but once you had Marvel kind of finish up with Heroes Reborn, they brought the heroes back into the main Marvel universe, but brought in all these different creative teams to work on all these different new books they're releasing post Heroes Reborn. And so when it came to Avengers, they brought in Kurt Busiek and George Perez. Now, for these two guys, it made a lot of sense. These two guys worked well together. And so when it comes to their Avengers run, a lot of people still celebrate the idea of their run and love it so much. Now, we already did one full story video about their run, the first like 12 or 13 issues. I want to say 12 because this full story video should collect issues number 13 all the way up to issue number 23. Now, I could be wrong there, but like, hey, I make mistakes. But either way, here are a few more stories that were done by Kurt Busiek and George Perez. I do hope you enjoy. Okay, so I kind of want to go ahead and continue our coverage over Kurt Busiek and George Perez run on the Avengers. And we're going to cover issue number 12. Now, if the video is still too short, I might go ahead and cover issue number 13 as well, because issue 12, 13, I want to say 14 as well, are just a bunch of one-shot storylines that we could possibly bunch together into one video. But issue number 12 is pretty long. And the reason why, because it's the Avengers going up against the Thunderbolts. And yes, you heard that right, the Thunderbolts. And technically, we kind of saw this coming. And let me explain why. Because all of this is coming out of the idea of the Onslaught event. Let me explain. You see, there was this massive crossover called Avengers X-Men Onslaught. Basically, at the end of that event right there, you had this powerful being known as Onslaught be defeated by our heroes. And so you had the Avengers and Fantastic Four run into Onslaught, but then teleported over to the Heroes Reborn reality by Franklin Richards. Now, here's the thing, because for Heroes Reborn, it was really more of Marvel just trying to push those characters away that were no longer selling, bringing in old creators to hopefully fix those characters to bring fans back into Marvel Comics. Now, after 1 year, that plan did not work properly, and you had the heroes come back into the main Marvel universe. And the reason why I'm bringing all that up, because while the heroes were gone, you did have this brand new team appear, better known as the Thunderbolts. Now, we have talked a lot about the Thunderbolts on my channel. Now, technically, we cover the later versions of the team, but when it came to the Thunderbolts, while the Avengers were gone, they were the Masters of Evil, a group of characters who were well-known villains who were supposedly trying to turn their lives around. And here's the thing, because you also had the idea of the team being led by Baron Zemo, who was also pretending to turn his life around as well. But in reality, he was not doing that, but also half the team was also pretending as well. Now, the other half of the team, they kind of love the idea of being heroes. And so once you had the public find out the Thunderbolts were just the masters of evil, and some of them were still being bad guys in disguise, you had the public kind of turn their backs on the Thunderbolts. Now, again, only half the team was in disguise. The other half said, you know what, let's continue the idea of being heroes. Now, by this point, you also had Hawkeye leave the Avengers and he joined the Thunderbolts. And the reason why, because for Hawkeye, he kind of want to get back in that leader role like he was when it came to the West Coast Avengers, but also he kind of wants to help the Thunderbolts go into the right direction. And so in our last Avengers video, you had the Avengers realize that Hawkeye had just disappeared. But then the morning news, as we get into the opening pages for issue number 12, We see Hawkeye on the news. And when we do, it's really more of us seeing Hawkeye at the moment just hanging out with the Thunderbolts. And so for the Avengers, they're kind of wondering, like, okay, if Hawkeye left the Avengers, why in the world would he join the Thunderbolts? But on top of that, they're also kind of thinking the possibility that Hawkeye is being mind controlled. Now, for most of the Avengers, especially when it comes to Steve Rogers, he believes that, the Thunderbolts are still evil, but not realizing that half the team is really trying their best to turn their lives around, and that's truly it. But while you have the Avengers also trying to contact Hawkeye through his Avengers card, you then have Hank Pym reintroduce Vision. Now, for me personally, this is really important. And the reason why, because for the Vision, he was in the first story arc, but he got severely injured in that story arc. And so he had on the sideline ever since that first story arc. But while he was on the sideline, Scarlet Witch magic was able to bring Wonder Man back to life. That right there is really important, and let me explain why. Because for Wonder Man being back in the picture again, that allows the Scarlet Witch and him to date one another again. And so for the Vision, even though he has been somewhat cold toward the Scarlet Witch in this entire run, at the same time, we get the idea that he is really bothered about how the Scarlet Witch is now dating Wonder Man. Now, he does kind of give us a hint that he does care for her still. And the reason why, because he says, I have not seen you this happy since our trip together for our honeymoon. And so for the Scarlet Witch, she wants to know, why did he bring that up? Because for the Vision, it's also him trying to pretend that he is no longer a being that has feelings. Now, yes, he's a robot, but he has been trying his best to move away from the idea of being that robot that had kind of learned how to feel different types of emotions. Now, I do want to go ahead and shift over to Firestar. Here's the reason why. Because for Firestar, we had learned in an earlier storyline that her powers was doing damage to her health. Let me explain. You see, for Firestar, we had learned that with the microwave radiation, it was kind of building a radiation in her cells, of course, damaging her health. And that right there is kind of unique because most of the time for mutants or really any heroes in the world of Marvel Comics, when it comes to someone's powers, they don't usually affect the host. They usually affect the people around them or possibly their target. But for the host to be hurt by their own powers is kind of unique. And so for Firestar, we had learned that her cells were just building up all this radiation. And so for Hank Pym, what he did was he had built a suit that is actually able to get rid of all that radiation in her body, but also help her cells begin the process of protecting her from her own powers. And so for Firestar, she's all happy again about being on the Avengers because of Hank Pym being able to save her life technically. But while you have the Avengers at the moment just hanging out at Avengers Mansion, well, that is when they get the call that the Thunderbolts have been officially located. So we kind of find out that for the Thunderbolts, what they're doing at the moment is trying to find a new base. And so you had Hawkeye take the team over to the old base that belonged to Dominus. Now, we have not talked about Dominus at all on this channel. So, you know what? It's time for a quick breakdown. Okay, so there was this character known as Lucifer, not the devil, a guy known as Lucifer who belonged to an alien race known as the Arcane. Now, for Lucifer, his main goal was to help Arcane take over the Earth. He failed, thanks to the good old first class X-Men. Now, once he had lost that battle and he was sent into a different dimension, over time, he would just reappear and fight against different characters of the Marvel Universe. Like, for example, Iron Man. Now, over time, with him failing over and over and over again, when it came to Arcane, they said, you know what? We're tired, Lucifer, of failing. It's now time for our backup plan. And that was a supercomputer known as Dominus. Now, when it came to Dominus, he was able to take a human form and fight against the Avengers. the West Coast Avengers. Now, you did have the West Coast Avengers being able to defeat Dominus, but you had Dominus leave and went back to the Arcane home world. And so, with him gone, the base was just left behind. And so, for Hawkeye, this base should be perfect enough for the Thunderbolts to use for the time being. And so while you do have the Thunderbolts begin the process of looking around the place, you still see some of the members kind of telling us, the readers, that they don't truly trust Hawkeye completely. And the thing is, they still feel like Hawkeye is still part of the Avengers, and sooner or later, with Hawkeye being around, the Avengers are going to try to set them up and ambush them to take them in. But either way, while you do have Songbird just flying around, when she goes back outside the base, she's then confronted by the Avengers. Now, with Songbird already assuming that Hawkeye is somebody that cannot be trusted, but also the idea of the Avengers being there, you have Songbird begin to attack the Avengers. And you then have the rest of the team up here besides Hawkeye, and they all begin to fight against the Avengers. Now, as the battle goes on, yet a Scarlet Witch kind of realized something here, that she does not pick up any negative emotions when it comes to the different members of the Thunderbolts. But it's also her saying, like, you know what? Let me go ahead and find Hawkeye. Now, while she's trying to do that, she does find Hawkeye, and you have Hawkeye tell her, like, listen, they're not bad people, and technically, the reason why I stay hidden so long, I wanted to see how my team would do up against the Avengers. And for me personally, it does seem like my team is kind of able to hold their own against the Avengers. That's pretty cool. But also, we should probably go out there and break the fight up. And so once you do have the battle be wrapped up, you did have Steve Rogers try to go off on Hawkeye about the idea of him leaving the Avengers, joining this team full of criminals, and also the fact that, like, with them being criminals, they cannot be trusted. There's no way these characters are trying to redeem themselves. Now, for Hawkeye, he kind of feels like that's not fair. And the reason why, because for Steve Rogers, he took in Hawkeye, he took in the Scarlet Witch, he took in Quicksilver. All three characters were technically bad guys at first, who then turned, to good guys. But it's also Hawkeye saying, like, listen, when it comes to Beetle there, he already agreed to turn himself in. But at the same time, he's also on that path for redemption. And so for Hawkeye saying, here you are right now, assuming, but not trying to understand, or at least talk to me to kind of figure out what is really going on. Now, while you do have both parties talking to one another, that is when you have another being appear, and this being is known as Dominex. Now, for Dominex, he was the backup to the backup plan, where basically for the Arcane, if Dominex and also Lucifer had failed, Dominex is supposed to step in and just go ahead and blow the entire planet. And so while you do have the Avengers and also the Thunderbolts try to work together to fight against Dominex, you have the Avengers get completely knocked out by this powerful robot whose goal is to blow up the entire planet. Now, once you do have the Avengers wake up, they're then confronted by Firebird. Now, Firebird is a character that we have not officially talked about on the channel. And the thing is, I'm not going to do that now. And the reason why, because for Firebird, she's not really an important character for the sake of the story. Just know that for Firebird, she fought alongside the West Coast Avengers when they were at this base last time, fighting against Dominus. But it's also her telling the Avengers that while they were knocked out, Dominex began to walk over to a certain point of the Earth. And that point he's going to is where the crust of the Earth is at its thinnest, which allowed him the chance to blow the core up, which of course will blow the Earth up as well. And so right now you have the Thunderbolts trying their best to fight against Dominex. And so for Steve Rogers, that means the Avengers must get back into the game. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and shift over to the Vision and the Scarlet Witch because in the middle of their battle, you had a Scarlet Witch wanting to have a conversation with Vision. Now, this conversation is technically really important for her because for her, she believed that when it came to Onslaught, there was a possibility the Vision had forgotten everything about his past, but also all those different emotions that were attached to those things that happened in the past. But then you had Vision earlier bring up the idea of their honeymoon and how happy she was on their honeymoon. And so for the Scarlet Witch, it told her, you remember everything and those emotions are still there for you. But it's Vision saying, like, listen, over the years, I have caused you a lot of pain, and probably it's best for you to go ahead and be with Wonder Man. But on top of that, Wonder Man do one thing I cannot do, which is give you children. I'm not really human, and he is. So you're probably better off to be with him. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and skip over a few pages and kind of get into the idea of the ending of this battle. And the reason why, because really most of the pages is just our heroes trying their best to find the best way to bring down Dominex. But Hawkeye does got a game plan here. You see, for Hawkeye, he tells Moonstone to appear as Dominus. And remember, Dominex is the backup to Dominus. And so with Dominus being there, quote unquote being there, but also in a human form, for Dominex, he must now listen to the fake Dominus. Now, this won't last that long, but it should allow Tony Stark and Hank Pym long enough to figure out how to bring down Dominex, which of course is the core. And so once you have them find the core, you then have Hawkeye tell the rest of his team, the Thunderbolts, to go out of their way to blow the core up, which of course also blows up Dominex, and he is officially defeated. But the last few pages of this storyline, it's really more of Hawkeye saying, like, listen, I have to do this. I have to go out of my way to lead the Thunderbolts, to kind of bring them over to the side of good, but also show them like what it's like to be a hero. Now, you also have Hawkeye go out of his way to get rid of his Avengers card, to show like he is technically breaking his connection to the Avengers for the time being to be the leader for the Thunderbolts. Now, it's also Steve Rogers telling to him and also the rest of his team, like, listen, y'all get one chance. As soon as you guys cross that line, me and the Avengers are going to shut you guys down. But you didn't have Hawkeye and his team leave, and that ends issue number 12. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back into our coverage over the Avengers, written by Kurt Busiek and artwork done by George Perez. And honestly, we're like, what, 12 issues in? I can say most definitely, like, I truly do love this run so far. Like, I don't know what's going to happen down the road that could possibly change my mind about this run, but for right now, I'm kind of enjoying reading this run for the first time ever in my life. But getting into Avengers issue number 13, this is more a Avengers, also a New Warriors storyline. Now, we have talked about the New Warriors in the past. As a matter of fact, the first time we had officially talked about that team was when I want to say in Acts of Vengeance. You had Thor fighting against the Juggernaut, which he barely won, but also you had the New Warriors appear for the first time ever in Marvel Comics. Now, when it came to the New Warriors, they were put together by a character known as Night Thrasher. Now, for Night Thrasher, he was kind of like your Batman character. And what I mean by that statement is that he lost his parents at a young age. So his goal was to go out there and fight against criminals as a way to bring them down and make sure that other people do not go through what he went through when it came to losing his parents. But he also put together a team. And of course, that would be the New Warriors. Now, the reason why the New Warriors in the storyline right now, because two members of the New Warriors had officially left and joined the Avengers. That would be Justice and also Firestar. And so that is why, as you get into the opening pages of the storyline, what you're seeing at the moment is the New Warriors coming back together for the first time. Now, it's not the entire team because most of the members of the team had officially moved on for different reasons. And matter of fact, as we go through this one single issue, you're going to learn more about what happened to the New Warriors and why they're no longer really functioning in the world of Marvel Comics. Now, with all that being said, you have the New Warriors currently going after this new mob family who had apparently received some powerful weapons. And so for our heroes, they kind of want to know where in the world is this mob family getting their weapons from. And so they allow one of the people to run away and kind of follow him back to where his family is getting the weapons from. Now, I do want to go ahead and shift over to Wonder Man and also the Scarlet Witch. And here's the reason why. Because for these two characters, especially for the Scarlet Witch, has gone through a lot. Now, for Wonder Man, he was killed off back in Force Works. But earlier in this run, you had a Scarlet Witch being able to bring him back to life, which honestly is pretty cool. But here's the problem, though, because for the Scarlet Witch, it was kind of like her stuck in the middle. Like, what should she do? Date Wonder Man or get back with Vision? Now, for Vision, he told the Scarlet Witch at first that he does not remember anything when it comes to their relationship. But that was a fat lie. He remembers everything. But it's also the Vision saying, like, listen, I'm going to step away because the only thing I have done for you is cause you pain. And I hate the idea I did that to you. And so I want to make sure that I'm no longer around to cause the pain I did for you. But the problem is that for the Scarlet Witch, you can kind of tell she's wondering, what is the right move to make here? Get back with Vision or try to, or continue to date Wonder Man. Now for Wonder Man, he's okay with the idea of just stepping away to allow her to get back with Vision. But she does not want to do that, it seems, at the moment. Now, you do have a meeting get called for the Avengers. Before we are able to see that meeting, we do see the New Warriors right now back at their base waiting for that tracker they put on that one guy who they allowed to run away to hopefully figure out where is this new mob family getting their weapons from. Now, while you have the New Warriors waiting, that conversation from earlier continues on. The whole idea of the New Warriors no longer being a team. Like, they still come together, but not as often as they used to back in the day. Because most of the New Warriors at this point were off doing different things in different books for different characters. And so right now, it's the New Warriors just hanging out. And for Firestar, really more for Justice, not Firestar, he kind of believes that him and also Firestar are the reason why the New Warriors are no longer around. Now, for the Avengers, they're really having a meeting about the idea of who should be the leader of the team, because when it came to Marvel, they really tried their best to make sure all the books were connected. And this is not me saying like they never were connected prior to the storyline. Like, it's really more connected now than it was in the past. And the reason why I'm saying that, because for Iron Man and also Steve Rogers, they had things going on in their own books. And so unfortunately, they're not really around at the moment when it comes to the Avengers. And for Thor, he also has his own thing going on as well. So Thor, he cannot be the leader. Now, you also have Wonder Man say like, listen, I'm not officially part of the team yet. And for Vision, the last time he was a leader, he was being controlled by a super villain. And so for the Avengers, they're kind of like, okay, cool. Who should be the new leader of the team? And they all looked at one person that's left, and that would be the Scarlet Witch. While you have the Avengers trying their best to figure out like who become the new leader of the team, we do shift our focus over to the New Warriors, right? Because for the New Warriors, they realize where the mob family is getting their super weapons from. Of course, it belongs to AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics. But while you do have our heroes fight against AIM, trying to bring down their whole facility, well, that is when our heroes are then confronted by Lord Templar. Now, this is his first appearance ever in like Marvel Comics. And over time, when it comes to our coverage over the Avengers, we're going to learn more about this character. But for right now, all you need to know for Lord Templar is that he's on this crusade where he believes that he has the ability to bring peace across the entire world. Now, with also being said, for the New Warriors, they kind of hate people who believe that they have the right to use their powers to force peace onto the earth. But it's also the idea the world has many countries that have their own governments to kind of help people and guide people in different ways. And hopefully one day, most likely not, we'll have peace across the entire world. But either way, for Templar, he's kind of like, listen, get out of my way because I'm here to take all these different weapons as a way to make sure they don't fall in the wrong hands. But also, I'm on crusade. I want to bring peace to the entire world. But it's also him showing us how powerful he truly is. Now, you do have Firestar go ahead and call in the Avengers. And the reason why, because for the Warriors, they're struggling at the moment. And so you have the Avengers on their way over to help out the New Warriors to fight against Templar. Now, this is also the time for the Scarlet Witch to show if she is able to, well, be a leader of the team. Now, for the Scarlet Witch, it's not her first time being the leader of a team because she was a leader of the Force Works team back in the early 1990s. Now, technically, while she was trying to be the leader of the team, you always had Iron Man kind of stepping over her authority, kind of always questioning her if she was actually able to be the leader, even though he made her, the leader of ForceWorks. Either way, it's time for her to shine. So once you do have the Avengers arrive at the scene, all you get to see is literally the Avengers being able to take on, well, Templar. Now for Templar, he also tries to convince the Avengers and the New Warriors to go ahead and give up. Because again, you have the Avengers bring up the fact that when it comes to our world, you have all these different countries. With these different countries, you also have all these different governments. But it's also Templar saying like those governments are right now trying to begin a certain process. That the governments across the world, different governments, have begun the process of begging Templar to use his crusade to bring peace across the entire world. Now the question is that true or not? But either way, for the Scarlet Witch, she does shine here in her big moment as the leader of the team, allowing Thor to get the one single blow he needed to officially bring down Templar. Now, Templar does escape because to him, this is only a battle. One small battle for his crusade to save the entire world. And so right after he does dip out, you then have the Avengers go back to Avengers Mansion. But as we get into the closing pages for Avengers issue number 13, what we see right now is, well, Justice trying to meet up with Firestar to inform her that he wants to quit the Avengers and go back over to the New Warrior because he feels like that it's his fault and also Firestar's fault that, the New Warriors have begun to fall apart. And he also believes that Firestar will be okay with the idea of quitting the Avengers. The thing is, though, when they do meet up, Firestar has news for him that her father is okay with the idea of her moving in with the Avengers. And so it's her kind of showing like, no, I'm full on with the idea of now being an Avenger and helping this team out. And for Justice, that is the opposite of what he wants her to feel at this exact moment. Now, as we get into Avengers issue number 14, we're really picking up now with Beast coming back over to Avengers Mansion. And the reason why, because for Beast, he was part of the Avengers, but also the fact that for Beast, he was also a close friend to Wonder Man. And so for Beast, once he got word that Wonder Man is alive again, for Beast, he had no choice. He had to head over to Avengers Mansion to go see his old friend. Now, when it comes to Beast, what he wants to do is take the Avengers out to celebrate the idea that Wonder Man is alive again. But the thing is with the Scarlet Witch, she wants the Avengers to go out of their way to find Templar. Now for Steve Rogers, he's all like, listen, how about this? I'll take some of the Avengers to go out there to hopefully find Templar, while you, Wonder Man, also Beast, go out for the night to celebrate the idea that your man is alive again. Now, you also have Vision there as well. Let's not forget, when it comes to like Vision brain pattern, it was built off the idea of Wonder Man's brain. So the Wonder Man, he kind of feels like that him and Vision are technically brothers. Now, you do have Beast, Wonder Man, and also Wanda try to invite Vision, but he says, no, I have my own plans for the night. Which technically he's lying because once you have Beast, Wonder Man, and the Scarlet Witch arrive at this club that Wonder Man loves so much, well, for the Scarlet Witch, she sees a man standing in the corner. It's the Vision right now using one of his old disguises that she, of course, recognized. And for her, she's kind of wondering like, Why in the world are you there for? And you have Vision say, listen, this club brings me peace. But also, let's not forget, it also brings Wonder Man peace as well. Once again, saying like, hey, let's not forget that these two characters are technically alike. They think alike. But either way, you do have all four characters now being able to sit down with one another to kind of celebrate the idea of Wonder Man being alive again. Now, with all that being said, you did have Wonder Man kind of wanting to be forgiven. And here's the reason why, because for Wonder Man, before he had officially died, he had some dark moments where he did fight against the Avengers. He almost killed off the Scarlet Witch. But the thing is, you had a Scarlet Witch say like, you should not be so hard on yourself. And the reason why, because almost every single member of the Avengers has gone through that moment where they had almost killed somebody because they were turned evil or possibly being controlled by somebody else some type of way. But either way, it's be saying like, dude, you should be happy about the idea that you are alive again. But now we have to switch over to Hank Pym. Now for Hank Pym, he's currently right now at the moment at this research facility in New Jersey. Now, here's the thing for Hank Pym though, because for Hank being here, we do learn that other scientists at his research facility, they were informed to kind of speed up their own projects, to kind of line up with Hank Pym's project. The problem is that for Hank Pym, even if the other scientists are done with their own projects to line up with his project, for Hank Pym, this company still can't use his project unless he says so. And so he finds it kind of weird that the other scientists are being forced to speed up their own projects to line up with his own project. Now, in the last chapter, we have talked about the idea that you had Templar kind of explain that the different governments around the world had begun the process of talking to him to bring peace across the entire world. Now, for the Avengers, they're kind of like, that can't be true. And so for Steve Rogers, you have him and the Avengers who are with him kind of meet up with different government officials who all basically say, like, we have not once talked to this Templar person. But the problem is right now you have the media informing the public about what Templar said. And even though you have your own government right now saying like, hey, listen, that's not true. We have not even seen him once or talked to him about the idea of bringing peace across the entire world. For the public, they don't believe their government at the moment. And so for our heroes are kind of wondering, what is Templar's big plan here? Now, for the Avengers, they do get a call. There's some trouble right now in the middle of the city. And that call came from the Scarlet Witch, who ran into another new character. And that would be Pagan. Now, we don't know much about this character right off the bat. It's the whole idea that there is some kind of connection to Templar. Now, for the Scarlet Witch, Wonder Man, and also Beast, they were there at the moment, also Vision, when Pagan arrived. And so for our heroes, they were trying their best to handle him, but unfortunately couldn't do it. And so you do have the rest of the Avengers appear. Now, this also brings in some new drama for this team. And the reason why I'm saying that, because for the Scarlet Witch, she kind of realized that the Avengers are not really up to speed to handle something like this. And the reason why she is saying that, because she feels like the team is not being led correctly. The team has not worked out different procedures like they should have by this point to make sure that when it comes to a powerful villain like Pagan, they should be able to get innocent people out of the way, to keep the damage to a low level, but to also find different ways to bring this guy down. And right now for the Avengers, they're all over the place. Now at the same time, what we could also say is the roster has constantly been changed. You see, when it comes to Kurt Busiek and also George Perez, they gave us an Avengers team. But over time, you had different people leave the team, like Carol Danvers and also Hawkeye. But also at the same time, you had different people who are brand new joining the Avengers. Justice, Firestar, and you also have some people who just rejoined recently, but technically not on the team yet, like Wonder Man. And so for the Avengers at the moment, they're all over the place. And unfortunately for our heroes, Pagan does get away. And so once he does get away, you have the Avengers regroup back at Avengers Mansion. And once you do have the Avengers arrive back at Avengers Mansion, it's really more of the Scarlet Witch saying, like, okay, we got to sit down and talk. Like Steve Rogers, I feel like there's something wrong with the team. And it all starts with the idea that you, as our leader, is the problem. Now, at the end of this chapter, we also see Beast just go back home to the X-Men because around this time for Marvel Comics, the X-Men were dealing with the whole idea of the legacy virus. But now we dive into issue number 15. And when we do, we see the return of a certain character we have not seen in a short period of time. And that would be Triathlon. Now, for Triathlon, he is somebody who's 3 times the power of the peak human physical capacity. He's 3 times as strong as a man can get, 3 times fast, 3 times the reflexes, the senses, the stamina. Like, he's just that good. Now, with him also being back in the picture again, this also begins the process of us kind of learning a tad bit more of the triune understanding. Because we had learned that for triathlon, he was this athlete, right? Like, he was in the Olympics. The problem was that he got caught using steroids. And so because of that, it brought his whole entire life down. Fast forward, when it came to the triune understanding, they began to build up this following, the idea that their main goal was to help humans reach their full potential. And so when it came to triathlon, they grabbed him and said, we can help you reach your full potential, and slowly turn him into triathlon, this great superhero. And so as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, we see the triune understanding has begun the process of getting a bigger following now, to the point where they now have an actual base. Because for the longest time, they were just kind of using different churches, basements, or different rundown buildings, but now they have their own place. And they now have this big following of people. And also, they're trying to use triathlon as their perfect example of what they did for somebody. Like, if you join their organization, you also have the ability to reach your full potential as well. But we also get the chance to meet their actual leader, and that would be a character known as Jonathan Tremont, or Tremont. But either way, for this one particular character, he'll become very important in later storylines involving the triune understanding, but also the idea of, well, Lord Templar. Now, we do have to switch over to the Avengers. Because for the Avengers, what they're doing at the moment is using different pieces of technology to hopefully locate Templar, their main target at the moment. And they're trying to use new technology as a way to hopefully locate him. Now, this idea came from the Scarlet Witch. As a matter of fact, we do kind of go back a tad bit in time. We had the Scarlet Witch sit down and have a conversation with Steve Rogers. Because earlier we saw her kind of bring up the fact that she had some concerns about how this team is being run. And honestly, everything she says here makes a lot of sense, because for the Avengers right now, this current roster, they have too many issues. They already lost a few members. You have new folks right now trying to get into the team, but you also have the different members of the Avengers kind of facing their own problems away from the team. And so what she's saying right now is Steve Rogers still can be that field leader. But when it comes to the rest of the team, they have to now begin the process of training and possibly doing like duo training as well. Get 2 people in there who have not really fought together in the past as much and begin the process of learning how to, well, work together. It's her bringing in all these brand new ideas. And matter of fact, she says, why not let someone else each time run the meeting? Again, bringing more and more people in, getting them more involved. It's her saying, like, we got to stay involved. We got to stay connected. We got to do more training. We got to do all these different things if we're going to be a well-functioning team. And Steve agrees. And for me personally, I agree as well. And so that kind of leads us back to the present day where you have the Avengers right now using Iron Man's tech to hopefully locate Lord Templar. The problem is that their technology leads them right over to the triune understanding. And so when they do arrive, they're then confronted by Triathlon. And for Triathlon, he kind of gets very upset very quickly here. And the reason why, because he feels like it's the Avengers saying, like, oh, your organization here is well connected to a powerful supervillain. But for our heroes, they're kind of like, listen, we don't have the full picture yet. We kind of go ahead and look around. Now, while you have the Avengers having this conversation with Triathlon, they don't realize they're being watched by, well, the leader of the actual organization. And he tells guys, you know what, guys, don't worry if the Avengers are here. Everything will slowly be taken care of. Because just like that, you have Pagan reappear. Now, the last time he was here in the last chapter for Pagan, he's this unknown character, this unknown powerful character, where the Avengers are not really able to do anything to him at all. And so we once again watch the Avengers try their best to fight against him, but at the same time, they're still losing this battle once again. But while you have all that going on, you also have other things being set up as well for later storylines. Like, for example, the idea of, well, the Wrecking Crew, because the Wrecking Crew was able to break free once again. So you have them right now in Iowa just robbing this random city bank. And while doing that, out of nowhere, they are then teleported away. And unfortunately, we're not going to see them until the next video. But I kind of want to go ahead and switch back over to the battle between the Avengers and also Pagan. Here's the reason why, because as the battle does continue on, you have the Avengers struggling. But I kind of want to focus on the battle between Pagan and also Thor, because you do have Thor say, you know what, it's now time for me to go ahead and cut loose. So you have Thor try his best to bring down Pagan. But the problem is that Thor can't finish the job. But you did have Lord Templar appear. And for Lord Templar, he was able to easily bring down Pagan. But let's not forget, in an earlier chapter, Thor was able to overpower Lord Templar and get a hit on him. So why couldn't Thor be able to bring down Pagan if Lord Templar is able to bring down Pagan? And so for the Avengers, especially for the Scarlet Witch, is her kind of realizing that there's something going on when it comes to Lord Templar, the Tribune, and also, of course, Pagan as well. But this kind of leads us into the ending of today's storyline where we do switch over to, well, the leader of the Tribune. Now, for the leader of the Tribune, what I want to say here is that we see him go out of his way to talk to his community, where he basically talks bad about the Avengers, painting this bad image of them, even though the Avengers just only came here to figure out if Lord Templar is hiding there, but also the fact that they were trying their best to protect the innocent people from Pagan. But now you have the leader of the Tribune trying his best to have his community turn their back on the Avengers. We also see the leader of the Tribune is working with Lord Templar, who's also trying to get the public to turn their back against the government, but also the Avengers as well. Now, the next storyline we're going to cover is really more the idea of us seeing Ultron come back into the picture. But this is where okay, so we have been covering Kurt Busiek and also George Perez run on the Avengers. Here's the thing, because in the middle of their run, you actually had some different creative teams like come in for a short period of time to give those two guys a quick break. Like, for example, you had Jerry Ordway come in and give us a 3-part storyline that took place right in the middle of the run done by Kurt Busiek and George Perez. Now, this storyline is really dealing with the Wrecking Crew because we saw them in our last video. For a quick second there, they were going on a rampage and then out of nowhere, they were teleported away. Well, we do kind of find out why as we get into the opening pages of issue number 16. And that would be the Doomsday Man. Now, the Doomsday Man has been around for a good while in Marvel Comics. Like, he first appeared back in Silver Surfer issue number 13 in 1969, I want to say. But when it comes to Doomsday Man, he was, like I said, a Silver Surfer villain, but also a Miss Marvel villain as well. And matter of fact, Miss Marvel played a very important role in this three-part storyline, and you'll see why here in a moment. But when it comes to Doomsday Man, he was created by the US military as a way to explore space. The problem was that the US military realized that how powerful this being truly was. And so their main goal was to just lock it away. They tried their best to keep it inside a concrete tomb. The problem was, again, it was just too powerful. It broke free. Now, Silver Surfer was able to stop it back then, and of course came back a second time for Miss Marvel to battle it, but now it's back for the third time. Now, when it comes to Doomsday Man, it was him who had teleport the Wrecking Crew away when he came to our last video. We also learned it was him who had helped the Wrecking Crew get out of prison, but also kind of gave him some power as well. Like, hey, you know what? Here's some energy to make you stronger, and now you're able to cause more havoc, but I have a job for you as well. That job is to find Miss Marvel. But here's the problem though, because for the Wrecking Crew, even though Doomsday Man said like, hey, go out there and find me Miss Marvel, they're not going to go after Miss Marvel. They're going to go after Captain Marvel instead. And so for the Wrecking Crew, that means heading over to New Orleans. Now, in the 1990s, you only had, I want to say, two Captain Marvels at this point, and we're close to getting our third Captain Marvel in Marvel Comics. But at this time, there only been two Captain Marvels, and the second one was Monica Rambeau. Now, when it comes to Monica Rambeau, she's no longer using the name Captain Marvel. She's now going by the name better known as Photon. Now, here's the problem though, because for the Wrecking Crew, all they were told was go after Miss Marvel. In their mind, that would be Captain Marvel, which is a female, which is Monica Rambeau. And so with the Wrecking Crew arriving in New Orleans, they begin the process of causing havoc as a way to bring her out into public to battle against her, but to also grab her and deliver her over to, well, their new leader. But this leads us over to the Avengers. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, you had a Scarlet Witch kind of bring up a good idea for the Avengers. The idea of every single member of the team being allowed to kind of lead different things when it comes to the team, like training or meetings or even out in the field. But it's also the idea of trying to build bonds with one another, but to also make sure the Avengers are going through different training sessions as well together so that they can learn how to fight well together. Now, for the meeting, it's Justice's turn to actually lead the meeting. The problem with Justice is that he just freezes up. Like, he is so nervous because he is now talking in front of the Avengers, these heroes that he looked up to, like Captain America, the Scarlet Witch, Wonder Man. Now, Firestar, we see that she's kind of fitting in very easily. She's no longer frightened by the idea of being on the Avengers. But this also kind of opens the door to allow some old Avenger members to come back into this book as well. And what I mean by that is, while you have the Avengers just chilling out at Avengers Mansion, well, that is when you have the Black Knight arrive. But at the same time he arrives, you have Photon arrive as well. Monica Rambeau. Now, for Photon, she was just badly beaten by the Wrecking Crew. And so it's her coming to the Avengers for help. And so, of course, you do have the Avengers agree to help her, but she also remembers that they're back in New Orleans, the Wrecking Crew, which means they're going to most likely cause a whole lot of havoc to hopefully bring her back out in the public to battle her and to also capture her. And so she leaves the Avengers to go ahead and to hopefully do some kind of work against the Wrecking Crew while you have the Avengers catch up to her. And so that kind of leads into the rest of this chapter where you really do have the Avengers now fighting against, well, the Wrecking Crew. Now, here's the problem, because with the Black Knight being there, with Photon being there, you kind of have the Avengers a tad bit thrown off. But it's also kind of the book reminding us that that was the major point for the Scarlet Witch. The idea this team has gone through so many changes in a very short period of time, with the Avengers being back into the main Marvel universe after Heroes Reborn. And so for the Avengers, they're kind of struggling against the Wrecking Crew. Now, it's not me saying the Wrecking Crew completely suck or anything, but it's the idea of the Avengers, this well-known team, this team of different heroes who have been around for a good while, should be able to handle the Wrecking Crew. Also, the Avengers, they have the numbers, but it's also, again, like I said, it's the fact the team is now working well together, but also other factors as well. Like, for example, Photon, her powers are not really doing damage to the Wrecking Crew. Instead, it's powering them up. You have innocent people just running all over the place. You got buildings falling all over the place. It's just complete mess at the moment. But you did have the Wrecking Crew being able to grab Monica Rambeau. Now, with them being able to grab Monica Rambeau, they did hit their button on the device that was given to them by their new leader. Like, hey, listen, we were told once we get her, let's get the heck out of there. But for the Doomsday Man, he realized that for the Wrecking Crew, they don't have the Marvel he's looking for. He wants Miss Marvel, the person that has Kree DNA inside of her. When it comes to Monica Rambeau, she does not have that Kree DNA. So just like that, he knows that they have grabbed the wrong Marvel character. So he has no choice but to go ahead and risk the chance of being located to just teleport Carol Danvers over to him. And let's not forget, when it comes to Carol Danvers, she was facing a drinking problem that got out of control, like way out of control. And so for Miss Marvel, she had officially left the Avengers before the Avengers had the chance to like fire her or do something about her. And so ever since then, she's kind of been on her own. And so she runs into Wasp. But while you have the two characters talking to one another, boop, just like that, there goes Miss Marvel, who was grabbed by the Doomsday Man, teleported away. But for the Wrecking Crew, they also do teleport away. Now, when they do teleport away for the Avengers, one, they have no idea that Carol Danvers had also been taken away. But two, it's also the fact like Monica Rambeau is now with the Wrecking Crew, and they have no idea where the Wrecking Crew had just went to. Now, as we dive into issue number 17, we kind of get into the idea of what exactly is going on with the Avengers. And let me explain. You see, as we get into the opening pages, we do learn that for the Wrecking Crew, at the very end of the last chapter, we were kind of left to believe that they were being teleported away by Doomsday Man. But in reality, they were being vaporized. Now, what happened next was you had a Scarlet Witch use her magic on the Wrecking Crew to hopefully keep them alive. But the problem was they were then teleported into another dimension. Now, this other dimension is well known because we actually had talked about this other world in this other dimension when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. And that would be Pol Macus. And I really hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, Pol Macus is the actual home to another character known as Archon. Now, for Pol Macus, it was this world in this other dimension that just glorified warfare. And so when Archon finally showed that he was the greatest warrior in being able to lead the entire planet, but especially the capital of this home world, better known as Imperion, he was, the ruler for a good while. But either way, when it comes to our Avengers, they had a few run-ins with Archon over the years, and so did the X-Men as well. But here comes the problem though. The Wrecking Crew has supposedly been teleported over into this other dimension thanks to the Scarlet Witch. But back on Earth, we do pick up with Iron Man and also, Justice. You see, in the last chapter, when it came to Justice, he was badly injured by, the Black Knight, technically, while they were fighting against the Wrecking Crew. But with his injuries, he had to stay behind. And so you had Iron Man basically volunteer to watch over Justice, but also call in Jane Foster, who is a doctor at this point, to give him a checkup. And she basically says, dude is sidelined until he is fully recovered. Now, for Justice, he is not going to lie down that easily. But you then have Wasp and also Hank Pym arrive. And the reason why, because for Wasp, she saw what happened to Carol Danvers, who was taken away by Doomsday Man. And so now it's time for Iron Man and Wasp and also Giant Man to work together to hopefully find, well, Carol Danvers. Now, as we do switch over to Miss Marvel, this is where we kind of begin to learn what's going on with Doomsday Man and also why he wanted Carol Danvers so badly. You see, like I said earlier, when he came to Doomsday Man, the second time or the third time he reappeared in Marvel Comics was back in Miss Marvel Comics. Now, with that being said, when it came to the Doomsday Man, he was kind of being controlled by AIM, right? But also being controlled by one particular weapon maker, better known as Corwin Kerman. Now, when it came to Kerwin, what he tried to use was a Psyche magnetron item that was created by the Kree, which of course back then kind of led into the creation of Miss Marvel, kind of gave her her powers until you had Marvel kind of retcon a few things about her origin. But either way, when it came to her receiving her powers and that core of the device had exploded, we were kind of left to believe that Doomsday Man and also Corwin were kind of defeated. But in reality, what happened was AIM found Doomsday Man, but also found the Doctor as well. Now, before the story is able to continue, you have Carol Danvers being able to break free from the container that Doomsday Man kept her in, and they began to battle against one another. But luckily for Carol Danvers, she does get backup. That backup would be the rest of the Avengers who are on Earth at the moment, minus Justice. So Wasp, Hank Pym, and good old Iron Man as well. And so when they do arrive, you also have Carol Danvers begin to work with them to fight against Doomsday Man. Now for Carol, she's kind of wondering like, where is the rest of the Avengers? The problem is the rest of the Avengers are currently in another dimension. And really, speaking of those Avengers, we do learn very quickly here that while you do have the Avengers right now trying their best to find the Wrecking Crew, they also realize that Archon's home world, his capital city, has been completely, well, wrecked. Now, for the Avengers, they do find some members of the army that was being led by Archon. They also find Tundra as well. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain the whole origin of Tundra because it does kind of get a little bit messy when it comes to Marvel and timelines and all these different things. I do want to make videos where I do kind of sit down and explain like origins of different characters that most fans may or may not heard of, like Tundra, for example. But either way, you do have Tundra kind of explain that the Wrecking Crew had won, defeated Archon, but two kind of now ruled over the city. Now they're also kind of hinting at the possibility that Photon, Monica Rambeau, has now officially begun to help out the Wrecking Crew. Now we know that's not the case. What's happening right now is the Wrecking Crew is forcing her to basically use her powers on them because earlier, as we saw, when she does use her powers, she makes them even stronger. But getting back over to the Avengers on Earth, we do learn here for the Avengers, they're having a really hard time defeating Doomsday Man, which honestly makes a lot of sense because in the past, he was a dangerous foe. Now, when it comes to Justice, like we saw earlier, the dude was put on the sideline for his head injury, but the dude kind of felt bad that he was not really able to help out Carol Danvers. So he snuck out of Avengers Mansion, found the Avengers, and now trying to help the Avengers fight against Doomsday Man. Now, when it comes to Justice, he does use his psychic abilities on the actual Doomsday Man armor, really inside the armor. And the reason why, because we do learn here that there is somebody inside the actual robot. And that right there is a first, because in the past for Doomsday Man, he was technically just a robot going around causing havoc for different heroes in Marvel Comics.
And that would be Corwin Corman. Now, we saw Corwin back in the Miss Marvel comics when Doomsday Man had reappeared in Marvel Comics. But is Corwin telling us that when it came to the Psyche Megatron device that was created by the Kree, when that device blew up, gave Miss Marvel her powers, but it also kind of affected the cells of Corwin as well, but also kind of infused him with the robot as well. And so for Doomsday Man, the actual robot, it was trying to find a replacement. And the reason why, because Corwin's body is decaying. And so for the Doomsday Man, the actual robot, it wanted Carol Danvers. And the reason why, because Carol Danvers' cells have been transformed over into, well, Kree cells. And so for Doomsday Man, it's kind of like, listen, this old man's gonna go. But that girl right there, she'll be a great replacement. But now with the robot being defeated and also, well, Corwin being defeated, you didn't have the Avengers being able to go back home. But the story's not done yet. Because let's not forget, for the Wrecking Crew, they had officially taken over Imperium City, but also keeping Archon as their, well, prisoner as well. We also see at the very end of this page that Steve Rogers is now officially a prisoner as well. But as we dive into Avengers issue number, well, 18, we're now picking up with the idea of the Wrecking Crew kind of telling us how they were able to take over, well, Archon's, well, palace. And we learned that right after they did arrive in this dimension, they were confronted by Greybeard. Now, Greybeard was kind of like the scientist who was a servant for Archon. And originally, he was kind of like the right-hand man for Archon when it came to different problems. But at this point, it does seem like he was trying to remove Archon, but also put someone else in place of power, but also kind of controlled them as well. Because when the Wrecking Crew had arrived to this reality, this dimension, he worked very quickly to make sure that Photon, would not be able to transform out of her energy form so that she could still constantly be used as a way to feed energy over to the Wrecking Crew. Now, at the end of the last chapter, we had saw that somebody was able to capture Steve Rogers. The rest of the Avengers are still free at the moment, but we do meet the great soldier that was technically able to go out of their way to capture Steve Rogers for the Wrecking Crew. But outside the palace, we do see the rest of the Avengers in this dimension has been able to build up an army of great soldiers and children as well. But I guess children warriors or pilots technically, because they are flying these aircrafts. But either way, for Black Knight, he was able to go out of his way to build up an army of soldiers to follow Tundra and the rest of the Avengers to break into the palace to hopefully bring down the Wrecking Crew. Now, once you do have the army that the Avengers have put together to start attacking the actual palace, we do learn two things here. The first is that the great soldier that had went out of his way to supposedly capture Steve Rogers is actually Steve Rogers. But the person who's pretending to be Steve Rogers as a prisoner is, well, no other than Vision. And so you have Vision being able to find Archon and then being able to, well, free him. Now, we're also getting reminded that in the past, there was this point in time where the Scarlet Witch and also Archon were kind of love interests for one another. And the reason why I'm saying that, because for Archon, he was told earlier that his lover, Tundra, his current lover, had been killed off. That he is now officially defeated as a great warrior, but also a great leader and a great lover. And so you have Vision push Archon outside of his prison cell, where you had the Scarlet Witch there. And once he sees the Scarlet Witch, he's kind of like, this is a woman I used to love in the past. And with her being here, it does something for me. Now, before you have the two characters possibly kiss one another, Wonder Man, Scarlet Witch, current boo, and also Tundra, Archon's current boo as well, both appear. Now, for Archon to see Tundra there, he now knows that he was lied to, but also kind of gives him more motivation to go out of his way to hopefully bring down the Wrecking Crew.
We also see Black Knight and also Firestar kind of work things out with one another. And what I mean by that statement is that because in the earlier chapter, when it came to Justice getting hurt, it was kind of Black Knight's fault as well. And for Firestar, she hated Black Knight in this entire storyline. It's the two of them coming together and fully understanding that the Black Knight did not do it on purpose, but at the same time, he does kind of love the idea of Firestar and Justice being on the team. Because for Justice, he realized that he's somebody who's just trying to fit in. And for Black Knight himself, he realizing that he's somebody still trying to prove that he can fit in. But either way, you have Firestar realize that she overreacted, she forgives him, but we're also kind of getting the idea of the possibility of Black Knight kind of liking Firestar. And so this kind of leads into a very quick ending here for this three-part storyline because when we do switch back over to the Avengers attacking the palace to hopefully bring down the Wrecking Crew, you also have Monica Rambeau be free. The problem is that she can't switch out of her energy form. She's kind of being forced to feed energy over to the Wrecking Crew. But she also realized if she's able to just continue to feed them, sooner or later, they will no longer be able to absorb any more power from her. Kind of like, blowing out a fuse by overpowering something. But either way, once you do have Monica Rambeau do that, you didn't have the Wrecking Crew being able to be easily defeated by the Avengers. And so once you had the Avengers, defeat the Wrecking Crew, you didn't have the Avengers head back home, where of course they find out what happened to the rest of the Avengers who were on Earth. Now, here is the closing part of this storyline because with the Avengers being able to be back together now on Earth, we then switch over to Hank Pym. And when it came to Kurt Busiek and George Perez, before they took their small break before this three-part storyline, they also kind of set up the idea of the return of Ultron as well. And so we see Ultron making his move and going after Hank Pym. Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the Avengers. And so we're still covering Kurt Busiek and George Perez run on the Avengers. Now, with that being said, we do pick up with a four-part storyline. It takes place in issues number 19, 20, 21, and 22. Now, with this four-part storyline, you can kind of tell that for Kurt Busiek, he was slowly kind of building up to it, the idea of bringing back Ultron into the world of Avengers comics. And the reason why I said it like that, because remember, this Avengers series is still picking up right after the idea of Heroes Reborn. And Heroes Reborn was when you had Marvel try to bring some life back into some characters by pushing those characters into a different reality. I'm not going to sit down, re-explain the whole idea of like Heroes Reborn because I have done it a lot in previous videos. But anyways, when it came to Kurt Busiek and also like George Perez, they kind of want to get the Avengers back on track when they came over to Marvel to work on this series. And Ultron is a major factor when it comes to the idea of the Avengers. Now, when it comes to the opening pages of the storyline, we actually pick up at the Wakanda Design Group plant that's in Long Island. And the reason why, because when it came to Tony Stark's company no longer being officially his at the moment, you didn't have Wakanda Design Group come in and start being the ones to create the Quinjets the Avengers use on different types of missions. But the problem is right now, this plant is currently being attacked by an unknown force. Now, you do have Black Panther arrive at the scene of the crime. Now, we're kind of left to believe at first that this is Ultron coming here for a particular goal. I'm going to tell you right now, it's actually not him at all. It's someone else who does play a somewhat important role for this storyline, but a later storyline down the road. But for Black Panther, they are really surprised to see this person. But now we're able to switch over to the Avengers, right? Now, when it comes to the Avengers, you have most of them there at Avengers Mansion. And really, they're getting ready for a press conference. Now, the Scarlet Witch, Wonder Man, and Vision are currently not there at the moment. As a matter of fact, this kind of leads into a different storyline I'm going to talk about here in a moment. But when it comes to the Avengers, Firestar and Justice are officially moving in at the moment. Also, Justice is sidelined at the moment. And the reason why, because he got injured in our last video. But also on top of that, for the Avengers, this press conference is about to go south very quickly. But before we're able to officially sit down and talk about the idea of the press conference, we switch over to the Scarlet Witch and Wonder Man. Now, they're at this cafe where the Scarlet Witch is able to celebrate her culture in many different ways in a very beautiful dance. And while she's doing that, and once she is done, you then have Wonder Man bring up the fact that his brother, the Grim Reaper, had officially been, well, broken out of prison. Now, at first, they kind of believe that he broke out with somebody else and most likely will come back down the road to hurt the Avengers. But really, the idea of his brother missing is really important for this storyline. But you then had a Scarlet Witch realize that there was somebody else at the cafe. She saw Vision, but in his human disguise. Now, she asked the owner, how long has he been there? And apparently the Vision been there before Wonder Man and the Scarlet Witch had arrived. But on top of that, apparently he's been going there for the last few months. And for the Scarlet Witch, she remembers that the Vision does remember a lot of things about their relationship in the past. And so it's her kind of wondering if he's still kind of lingering or holding on to the idea of possibly them getting back together. Who knows? Now, we are able to switch back over to the press conference, right? And this kind of goes back to what we saw in an earlier storyline. And let me explain. You see, when it came to the Avengers, they were trying their best to find a character known as Lord Templar. Now, while trying to find Lord Templar, they realized that all the different clues or trails they were following led back over to the triune understanding. And the triune understanding is a new concept around this time in Marvel Comics where their main goal is to help people reach their full potential as a human being. And that could be mentally or even physically. Now, the thing is, though, when the Avengers had arrived at the new base for the triune understanding, when they asked to look around, the organization told the Avengers no. But then you had another character arrive, better known as Pagan or Pagan. Either way, for the Avengers, it's kind of like, hey, listen, we're not trying to hate on their religion or hate what they stand for, but at the same time, it does seem kind of weird that they would not allow us to try to clear their name or figure out what is their connection to Lord Templar. And there is one. But when it comes to reporters, they're trying to paint this picture of the Avengers of being like this superhero team, not trying to respect other people's cultures or religions or other things. Now, in the middle of the press conference, you did have the Wasp arrive, and she's freaking out. And the reason why, because, well, this kind of brings us what we saw in a previous video, the idea of Ultron kidnapping Hank Pym. And so once you do have the Wasp inform the Avengers what happened to Hank Pym, you then have Jarvis walk into the room. Now, when he does, it's him informing the Avengers what's happening over at Black Panther's facility. And the robot there apparently is made out of adamantium. And they believe it has to be Ultron. And so while you have the Avengers on their way over to where Black Panther facility is at, you did have Firestar kind of ask about more information about Ultron. And so this allows the Avengers to kind of help her get caught up to speed. So you have the Avengers say, okay, listen, when it comes to Ultron, as we all know, Hank Pym was the one who had created Ultron. Now, Ultron had came back many times, but there was one point in time where he came back with a body full of adamantium. But also he had created other characters over the years, like Vision, for example, his son, or Jocasta, his first bride. And let's not forget about his second bride, and that would be Alchema. Now, Alchema was the second bride whose brain patterns was built off Mockingbird. But anyways, when the Avengers arrive at Black Panther's facility, well, they kind of find out it is Alchema who's the one currently attacking the facility, the second bride to Ultron.
Now, when it comes to Alchema, we have to remember that her and Ultron, they never truly saw eye to eye with one another. And the reason why, because, well, Homegirl loves violence. Like, she just loves killing. And that right there kind of changed the idea of Ultron trying to make her be his second bride. There were a few other things with that, but it's the idea that now she's here, and for the Avengers, they're kind of wondering if she's working with Ultron. But she says, listen, that's not happening because just in case you've forgotten, me and him could not see eye to eye. But she also tells the Avengers that she does know like where he is. But at first, the Avengers do struggle to fight against someone who almost at par with Ultron. Now, the Avengers do win, but only because the Scarlet Witch does come in at the very last second, using her hex magic to bring down Alchema. But here's the problem though, because you can kind of tell here that for Alchema, she allowed the Scarlet Witch to win because again, she has bigger plans down the road. But she does tell the Avengers, if you're trying your best to find Ultron, then turn on to CNN right now because I feel like he's doing something really big at the moment to kind of tell you guys where he is at. And that is when you have the Avengers find out that for Ultron, he is in a different country. And matter of fact, he wiped out almost everything in that country, better known as Florinia. And so you have this reporter on CNN just saying like, hey guys, look at this footage right here. Things are popping off in this country. The army tried their best to step in, but unfortunately, they all got wiped out. And then at the very last second in the shadows, we can see the body of Ultron, where of course with the Avengers, they definitely now know where he is at. And they're kind of like, oh my God, look at what Ultron did. He had officially wiped out an entire country. But again, they don't know what his actual plan is just yet. And so as we dive into issue number 20, we're really kind of learning more about what went down when it came to Ultron attacking Slorinia. And honestly, it was a beatdown because you are talking about the idea of a country just throwing everything they had at Ultron. First, it was the tanks and also the troops. They were not really able to take on Ultron. Then you had the Black Brigade go in there, a character Iron Man had fought against in the past. He was also defeated very easily. You also had Ember go in there as well, another character who was also defeated as well, but that character was really more based around magic. And so for our heroes, what they're seeing right now was just Ultron doing everything he can against this country and being able to easily wipe out the entire country. And so now you have other governments wanting to get involved. Russia, China, America, like everyone's kind of freaking out because Ultron is basically saying that this country will be the birthplace to his new race that he's trying to bring into this world. Now, they do have his second bride, but she's not talking at the moment. The idea of like what Ultron is planning. But at the same time, we have to remember when it comes to her, her and Ultron, they didn't see eye to eye. So we can kind of tell right off the bat that they're not really working together at all. But she does know like what Ultron is trying to achieve. Now, this kind of leads into the Wasp, Scarlet Witch, and also Wonder Man going over to the lab where Hank Pym was working at. Now, one of the people that he was working with is somewhat important for like the character of Hank Pym, but honestly, not that important for the storyline. But anyways, when you do have our three heroes walk in, you did have Wonder Man mention that the idea that his brother is also missing is most likely now looking like possibly that the Grim Reaper was kidnapped like Hank Pym was. Because when they walk into the lab with Hank Pym and see the destruction that was left behind by Ultron, is somewhat similar to what happened to Grim Reaper's cell. Now, with all that being said, you had a Scarlet Witch wanting to talk to Vision about the idea of him appearing at the cafe that her and Wonder Man were at, but you did have her realize that the Wasp is kind of going through a lot. Because the man she loved is currently missing. But it's also the fact that, okay, For the Wasp, she blames herself for the mental health of Hank Pym. Now, technically, no, she's not at fault here. It's the idea the man needed help, but unfortunately did not get that help he needed. Because for Hank Pym, he did lose a wife, and that did a huge effect to his mental health. But on top of that, it's the idea of Ultron. When he created Ultron and saw what Ultron became, he literally blamed himself over and over again for the idea of Ultron. But then even on top of that, there was a point in time where he was testing some kind of gas that affected his mind to the point where he believed that he was somebody else completely, better known as Yellow Jacket, and he believed that with him being somebody else, that he had murdered Hank Pym himself. He also then proposed to the Wasp. Now, she did marry him, but she's kind of hoping that it would keep his mental health, where it was at before it fallen down even worse, where it was at that point in time. Now, with them being married and Hank Pym slowly coming back, their marriage began to crumble. But also the idea that for the Wasp, what she wanted Hank Pym to do was open up to her more. And for Hank, he couldn't do that. And she kind of felt like she forced it onto him and kind of began this change in him that could possibly make things worse for him when it came to his mental health. Now, we're going to learn also here that there was a big secret that Hank Pym never told the Wasp or really anybody else. But you have Vision warn the Avengers who are there with him, like, hey, we got some trouble coming, like right now. And honestly, he was correct because out of nowhere, you have all these different versions of Ultrons from the past just pop up, an army of them just coming at Vision, the Scarlet Witch, the Wasp, and Wonder Man. And really, you will believe that kind of team right there, minus the Wasp, that they should be able to handle this army, but they easily get overrun and they all become prisoners of Ultron as he takes them away. Now, for the rest of the Avengers, they have no idea what exactly happened to the Scarlet Witch or, Vision, Wonder Man, and Wasp. Because for Iron Man, Firestar, Black Panther, Thor, and Captain America, they're all heading over to Sarnia to go to war, basically, with the army of soldiers from different countries to hopefully bring down Ultron once and for all. Now, for Justice, he won't be there with them because, again, he was sidelined because injuries from a previous storyline. But for him, he tells Jarvis, I want to do research on every single time Ultron had appeared in the past. And really, going back over to Serenia, we do see that in the base of Ultron, with him now having Vision, Wonder Man, Scarlet Witch, Hank Pym, the Wasp, and yes, we can now confirm he also has the Grim Reaper. He plans to use them as a way to bring in his new race into the world of Marvel Comics. And that leads us into issue number 21. Now, as we dive into issue number 21, we see the Avengers who are, fighting with the army of soldiers at the moment, just fighting against these zombies that were basically used by Serenia to kind of help protect the country. These zombies have been given cybernetic body parts to kind of make them fight for the country. Anyways, you do have the Avengers just going out of their way to hopefully bring them down. Now, for Firestar and Black Panther, their main goal is to hopefully find Ultron because once they're able to officially defeat Ultron, they should be able then to save the day. But speaking of Ultron, we do learn what Ultron is technically up to. Now, when it comes to Ultron, what he is trying to achieve is build a brand new hive mind off the brand new system that Hank Pym had basically built. It's the idea that for Ultron, when he does bring in his new race, they'll all be connected to a hive mind that he will basically control. Not done just yet, because the reason why he chose these 6 characters is all because of them being family. You see, Hank Pym, his father. The Wasp, his mother. The Vision, well, his son. The Scarlet Witch, kind of like a daughter-in-law because she did marry the Vision. Wonder Man's mind was used to help create the Vision's mind. And the Grim Reaper, that was Ultron's first true-on human ally. And so with all of these 6 different characters, he's going to use their personalities as a way to make different kinds of personalities for the brand new race that Ultron is trying to bring into the world. But at the same time, still being able to control all of them with their minds being connected to a hive mind with him being in charge of it. Now, you do have Ultron leave, and the reason why, because Ultron had just realized that, well, the other members of the Avengers, like Black Panther, Firestar, Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America, well, they had arrived and fighting against his forces. So for Ultron, it's kind of time for him to go ahead and handle business on the surface. So he goes to fight against the Avengers. Now, we had to switch back over to Virginia. And the reason why, because at this military base, we get reminded that Alchema is being well kept there, locked up. And the problem is right now, her children are on their way to break her free. And matter of fact, in a few panels, we do see that they are able to break her free. So this begins the process of her trying to make her own game plan. But when we do switch back over to the Avengers, well, they're struggling at the moment. And the reason why, because let's not forget, Ultron's body is made out of adamantium. So for our heroes, when they try to use all their different attacks, they're not really able to break through like they're kind of hoping to. But with that being said, when it comes to Black Panther, one of his energy daggers were technically able to kind of cut through Ultron's armor shell and hit him right in the eye. Now, when it comes to, well, Justice, let's not forget that basically he stayed behind to hopefully find a way to bring down Ultron. And so we see him currently just going through all the recent times Ultron had appeared over time in Marvel Comics. Like, for example, the idea where you had Ultron attack and fought against Daredevil, or the Doctor Doom situation. Like, it's him trying his best to learn everything he can about Ultron, but also find the best way to officially bring down Ultron as well. Now, we do switch back over to our heroes. And we see our heroes fighting against the latest version of Ultron, Ultron 16. And the reason why I'm saying that, because, okay, for our heroes, with them trying their best to battle against Ultron 16, when they get to that point where they find a way to like destroy Ultron 16, for our heroes, they believe at first that they had officially won, that they had officially brought down Ultron once and for all. That right there is a problem. And the reason why, because out of nowhere, you then have Ultron 17 appear. And it doesn't stop there, because then you have Ultron 23 appear. And it's like, wait a second, what in the world is going on here? And then at the very last second, Ultron 458 appear. And it's like, okay, Ultron has been building up an army of himself and possibly other robots to use against the Avengers. But right now, it does seem like all hope is lost. It does seem like Ultron might officially win. And so as we transition into like the final chapter of this storyline, what we're truly picking up with now is just the Avengers trying their best to survive, the army of Ultrons just coming at them at all different angles. And really, it does kind of seem like the Avengers might officially lose this battle. But back at Avengers Mansion, you have Jarvis be woken up by one of the alarms that was set at Avengers Mansion where there's trouble. And of course, it's the idea the bride of Ultron had escaped her prison. But the thing is, for Jarvis, he should be the last one be alerted about that. And so he's kind of like, where in the world is Justice? Justice has snuck out once again and basically flying over to where the Avengers is at, because he believes that he might have a way to bring down Ultron. But as we do switch back over to the Avengers, this is where we learn like what is the big secret that Hank Pym is currently holding on to. All right, y'all, here it is. So for many years, we had known that Hank Pym was the one who had created Ultron. But in reality, for Hank Pym, he uses his own brain patterns to build the mind of Ultron. And so for Ultron, he is thinking, he is acting like Hank Pym without any human regards at all in the mind of Ultron. Now, that right there becomes very important. We also see Ultron downloading the different personalities of the different people he has right now as prisoners.
Now, I kind of want to go ahead and skip over a few pages and get over to Vision trying to work with Ultron. Because for Vision, he has evolved since the last time Ultron has seen him. And so for Vision, he's able to hack into the computer system that Ultron had built, but also being able to project himself to communicate with Ultron. And so it's Vision saying, I understand what's going on with you. Your problem is that you're alone. It's the anger inside of you. You were created without no actual purpose. Now, it's also Vision saying, what truly helped me was finding love. And love can help battle the pain that you're currently feeling. And the thing is, I try my best to block out that thing, love, but I realize you truly can't. Now, this is Vision speaking from the heart. And it's him saying, Wanda, like, hey, I still love you and I want to be with you. So please, please just leave Wonder Man for me, girl. But it's also him trying to buy some time because he knows that Ultron will not really bite the bait. Like, it's not Ultron being like, hey, you know what? You're right, Vision. All I needed was love. That's why I created you and Jocasta and my other bride, because I was lonely. It was the anger. No, for Ultron, he's like, man, forget love. I almost cursed right there. It's Ultron saying, nah, I'm going to take you out now. But it's Vision saying, okay, yeah, I kind of knew it wouldn't work. But at the same time, I was just trying my best to buy some time. Because what Vision did was he helped release the Grim Reaper. And with the Grim Reaper now being free, you didn't have him being able to release the rest of the Avengers who are currently prisoners. And so now you got a full-on battle. And luckily for the Avengers, the rest of their team arrives just in time. The problem is that it's Ultron. Like, he made sure that he would be able to battle against all the different members of the Avengers, except at the very last second, you have Justice arrive. His game plan goes into motion here. Because what you had Justice do was basically bring over Antarctic vibranium. Now, Antarctic vibranium is basically anti-metal. It has the idea of dissolving all types of metal it technically hits. And so, when it comes to adamantium, it does not stand a chance at all. And for Hank Pym, that is perfect to bring down, well, Ultron. And so we get into the end of the storyline where you have Ultron be defeated by Hank Pym. Hank Pym, not Hank Pym, Hank Pym. When it comes to Hank just beating down on Ultron, but is Hank just releasing all of that anger he had inside of him for himself, but also for Ultron? Because every time Ultron had killed somebody, Hank Pym blamed himself. Every time Ultron did something evil, Hank Pym blamed himself. And so right now it's him just being able to let out all of that anger he had inside his body. Now, once he does all of that, you didn't have the Avengers technically go home. But for the Avengers, especially Wasp, she kind of realized what has been going on in the mind of Hank Pym. Now, once you do have the Avengers leave, you didn't have Alchema appear. Now, Alchema, she appears to pick up the chips that you had Ultron use to download the personalities of the different prisoners he had in his storyline, which means now she's then able to pick up where Ultron had left off at when it came to his master plan. Okay, so this might be a short video. And the reason why, because honestly, this video kind of wraps up the second volume when it comes to Kurt Busiek and George Perez run on, well, the Avengers. And so we pick up with issues number 23. Now, with this one single issue, we kind of get into the idea of Vision going up against Wonder Man, but really more of the two characters trying their best to come to an understanding about one another. And that part right there is really important because it's all about the idea of if they are completely different from one another, but also at the same time, both men who are madly in love with the Scarlet Witch.
But as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we're really kind of getting into the idea of us seeing the Avengers just going through a workout. Now, with the Avengers around this time, it is post Heroes Reborn. And the reason why I'm bringing this up again, because when it came to Marvel, they really tried their best to make sure that all their brand new creative teams did work together when it came to all the different books. So Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, the Avengers. Now, yes, they did that in the past prior to Heroes Reborn. But I kind of feel like at this point, it was Marvel really trying their best to make sure that all the different books were connected even more than it was prior to Heroes Reborn. And that's just my own personal opinion. I could be completely wrong to somebody else. But we do see our heroes right now just going through an entire training session. But the reason why I brought up that point right there I was stating earlier is because for Steve Rogers, he now has his shield again. You see, for Steve Rogers, once he came back after Heroes Reborn, he kind of went through this whole shield thing where he had different kind of shields for a few story arcs in his own comic book, but also in Avengers as well. But in his own book, he was finally able to get his old shield back once and for all. And so we see him being able to use that shield in battle. But you also have the Avengers at the moment being able to go through a training session that was only stopped by Justice. Now, this for this character right here is really important. And the reason why, because for Justice, in our coverage over Kurt Busiek and George Perez's run on the Avengers, he has been really trying his best to prove that he could be an Avenger. Now, technically, he has already proven that so many times when it came to helping the team out in different types of situations, even after being badly injured in a previous battle. But for Justice, he always kind of felt like he has something to prove. And so once you had Justice being able to be the one to finish the actual training session, it really shows that yes, he has grown a lot, but also kind of moving past the idea of believing that he has to prove something when it comes to the Avengers. But I now want to go ahead and transition over to the Scarlet Witch and Wonder Man. And here's the reason why, because you have these two characters that go out of their way to confront Vision. And here's the reason why, because in an earlier storyline, we had discovered that for the Vision, he was still madly in love with the Scarlet Witch. But by this point, he was trying his best to stay away from her. Now, in later parts of this video, we are going to explore the idea why he was doing that, but also the idea why he's so upset with the Scarlet Witch, but especially upset with Wonder Man. But for the Avengers, they also have other things going on at the moment, like the idea that right now outside their home, Avengers Mansion, you have an entire protest happening. And really, this protest is all about the idea of the Avengers not really having anybody of color on their team at this point. Now, technically, for your boy Fresh here, when I first began to read this run, I said ran this run. When I first began to read this run, I realized man, they don't have anybody on color on this roster. That's kind of wild. But at the same time, though, for the Avengers, they are a team that constantly changes. So over time, you're going to see different characters. And sometimes those characters are people of color who end up joining the Avengers. You just got to be patient. But for the public, though, it's kind of like, hey, there's no one on your team here at the moment who is somebody of color. That is pretty wild. Now, that's not it for the Avengers, because you also have to remember, in our last story arc that we had covered, Ultron had just wiped out an entire country. And let's not forget, Hank Pym was the one who had created Ultron. And so for the public, they're like, hey, we don't like the idea that Ultron had wiped out an entire country, but also two people that the Avengers had in their custody were able to escape. Of course, that will be the Grim Reaper and also Alchema. Now, at the same time, for the Avengers, they're also facing other issues that took place in other books, like Iron Man or Captain America. And so, for the Avengers, they're no longer that team we saw back in Avengers Day where everyone loved the Avengers. Instead, now by this point, it's the public now beginning to turn their back on the Avengers. But this kind of leads into the whole idea of Wonder Man versus the Vision. The reason why I say versus, like quotation marks, okay, see my hands here, but the reason why I'm saying it like that because you do have Wonder Man and Wanda confront Vision. And it's kind of like, hey man, why in the world are you trying to keep yourself away from Wanda if you still love her? Now, when it came to Wonder Man, when he came back to life, he made sure that Vision would be okay with the idea of him dating the Scarlet Witch. Because for Wonder Man, he knows that the Scarlet Witch and Vision were married. They were a couple. He's kind of like, hey, listen, if you still love her and want to be with her, I will stay out of the way. Vision said no, and you had Wonder Man say, fine, cool, I'll date her. But now we all know that he still loves the Scarlet Witch. It's kind of like, hey, Vision, what is your deal? And he says, you're the problem, Wonder Man. You're the problem. And this is Kurt Busiek kind of using the lore, the history of Vision, and also Wonder Man kind of take the storyline in a different direction. And what I mean by that statement is really more me saying, like, look at the Vision. The Vision was created by Ultron, yes, but the Vision was created by Ultron by using different parts of other Marvel characters, like, for example, Wonder Man. Wonder Man's mind was copied and put into the body of Vision. And so for Vision, he's saying, like, listen, when it came to me being who I am, I had a hard time adjusting because I was always the android that was basically a copy of you. Everything you liked, I end up liking as well. Jazz, chess, and the list goes on and on. I hated the idea of being a copy. But then here I go, I find Wanda. And when I found Wanda, for me personally, that showed that I was different, that I was not like you. I could be my own kind of person. It was organically something I liked. But then I stepped away. When I stepped away, who did she find? She found you. And here we go again. Something else that I did not technically like by my own. It was something that came from you. And so the Vision is him saying, like, I really can't be my own person because everything I like is because of you. And it sucks. And it sucks so bad. Now, mind you, for Wonder Man, he did get hit like 2 times by the Vision. But it's Wonder Man saying, shut up. Like, not like that, like, shut up, man. But more of like, shut up. Like, calmly shut up. Like, you don't realize that even though you say you're me, you don't realize I envy you. I am jealous of you. And here's the reason why. Because for Wonder Man, he always has been like this guy who's wanting to have somebody's approval. Because growing up with his father and also his brother, Grim Reaper, but especially for his father was seriously hard on both of the boys. But the idea that for Wonder Man, every single time he did something great, his father would say, hey, you could have done better, and walk away. It's never congratulations, son. And so for Wonder Man, he kind of did a few illegal things. And there was a point in time where he did supposedly die. Now, when he was supposedly dead, for the Grim Reaper, who was a good guy at first, who wanted revenge for his supposedly dead brother, it began the process of turning the Grim Reaper into an actual supervillain. And once you had Wonder Man come back to life, the only thing that happened to him was being able to join the Avengers and now becoming a hero. And so for Wonder Man, he kind of felt like he was never punished for the crimes that he had committed. Instead, he was always given things that he did not deserve. Being part of the Avengers, having a second and third chance in life. But seeing the Vision was this clean slate. somebody who's just like him, but has the ability to live a life without all the negativity that came from Wonder Man's past. And so for Wonder Man, he's telling Vision, like, dude, you're a better version of me. You have the chance to be a better me. And so for the Vision, he's kind of like, whoa, that's a lot to take in. And so you have the Vision just fly away. Now, once he does, the book does kind of end on the note, leaving us wondering, like, okay, will the Vision come back? We don't know. But that kind of ends volume 2 for Kurt Busiek and also George Perez run on the Avengers. And now we move on to volume 3.